Welcome to Legally Speaking with the Raise the Case. Today we are joined by Advocate Rohit Singh from PSK Legal Associates, a top commercial lawyer with extensive experience in various sectors like education, IT, banking, and pharmaceutical. On today's episode, we'll explore the implication of the data protection bill, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, let's start with the first question. Are you ready?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Please.
Can you explain the provision of the Personal Data Protection Bill?
Yeah, sure. So basically, before we step into the provisions of the data DPDP Act, what majorly we need to understand it that what it entails and what the existing law doesn't have. Right. So the basic understanding to that, I would say, is that everything that has been given till now, or all the statute put together, whether it is the IT Act or several other statutes that were already existing before DPDP Act, were only providing a basic structure or framework of things. However, under the DPDP Act, there is a comprehensive understanding with respect to the personal data, what it means to have and what it means by saying personal data, how the personal data is to be procured and processed, that all has been defined, and what happens in case of a breach. So, thus far, it has all been scattered. Under this DPDP Act, it all has been comprehensively not only defined, but also the steps that will be taken in case of a breach have also been defined. So, to put it into some pointers, I would say that number one is that it has established a comprehensive framework for protection of personal data, which was very much the need of the hour, considering the fact that India is actually becoming, the digital economy, and the world is actually looking up to India with respect to not only the digital transaction and the UPI interface, I would say, but in totality with respect to the total digitalization of everything, not only the coach, not only once you visit a hotel, not only once you open up your phone and some consents have to be given. Everything, almost every other day, rather every day, we are giving at least 100 consents on 100 different on points. So that is what I mean to say that personal data, we sometimes we don't even know that sometimes we're giving a consent, and that also becomes a part of the DPDP Act, and we don't even know that actually a consent has been given. So how
Exactly.
a consent has to be taken, that has
Yeah.
also been defined here, that what actually it means for with respect to the consent. And even if I've given, thus far we have all seen there is a checklist and you just have to tick the boxes and say, okay, I consent to all.
Accept.
So does that mean a consent at all? So this law also defines on the and also it tells us bit in detail that what it means and how it what it actually means to take a consent and in which form you have to take a consent. So it empowers the individual with respect to the control over their data, which I will be sharing in my upcoming session, that how it gives the individuals the control over their data. And it introduces the fiduciaries also with respect to handling the personal data. So, for example, if I've given you the data, now what is your responsibility as a fiduciary? That also gets defined here. It also, most importantly, establishes a board. So, thus far, it has all been given up to the courts, that now the Supreme Court or the higher courts will decide whether there's a data breach or not. This is the first time that actually there is an exclusive board, that is the data protection board, that has been introduced, who will be adjudicating upon these matters. So the primary objective is balance the data privacy with respect to the economic innovation, fostering trust in the digital ecosystem, because actually we are stepping into, or rather I would say we have already stepped into the digital ecosystem of the world, and we are the pioneers with respect to digital transactions, digital automacy. And with respect to that, I guess it is the need of the hour that this act was supposed to was ought to happen.
So, how does this bill differ from existing data protection laws in India, such as the IT Act 2000?
Yeah. So, like, I have already a bit of my answer in my last question to that also was with respect to the same, but I will just highlight what are the key differences. So, the IT Act 2000, it majorly focused on the cybersecurity, electronic transactions, limited data protection provisions were there that were in the section 43A and 72A. But under the DPDP Act, there is a it has been specifically dedicated to the personal data protection, detailed rights of the individual, accountability of the data handlers, and stringent regulations of the data processing. So not only we are only this time around we are focusing on the personal data, we are also defining what is personal data. Under the IT Act, it was a comprehensive law which included a lot of segments, like I said, cybersecurity, electronic transactions, etc. DPDPs, more specifically, is a comprehensive framework that works strictly with respect to the personal data, to say the least. Second is it is not only defining a few procedures which were never clear. So thus far, it was never clear how a consent has to be taken. I might be saying that I have taken consent of your personal data in a one generic form. So I can just simply write, me being a lawyer, I would just frame my sentences in a very nice manner, and I can just say that your data that has been secured under this XYZ platform can be used for better performance and for reviewing purpose and for internal what do we say, an internal reviewing process, etc. But does it actually, or is it actually being used in that sense? That's
No.
number one.
Yeah.
If it is not being used in that exact sense, then who's actually looking into it? Are we monitoring it? That how are you using my data? I just checked into a hotel yesterday. They took my Aadhaar card, etc. They took my details. Am I going to check that how are they using my data? Is it not being referred to all the data industry? Is it not being shared by the other comrades of this industry that okay, fine, this guy is a frequent traveler. You can suggest him XYZ travel options, and you can make some money out of it. So, is my data being used in the right sense? That is more particularly defined in DPDP Act. So, IT Act majorly lacked in a framework for personal data, which DPDP very well captures. DPDP Act covers more digital platform and introduces cross-border transaction flow and data flow as well, which was not present in the IT Act. So nowadays you'll see that data is being processed in one country, or I would say it is being captured in one country, processed in another country, and then stored in another country. So this all becomes a cross-border data flow. So that in particular being is being restricted or is being controlled and monitored under this act.
ओके। सो जैसा कि कोई भी बिल आता है तो उसके साथ राइट्स भी आते हैं। तो
Hmm.
what rights are granted to individual under this bill, and how do they impact consumers and businesses?
Correct. So rights in your question, I would say the right sense of the rights that you're talking about is basically the individual rights.
Exactly.
So जैसे कि हम लोग already थोड़ा बहुत discuss कर भी चुके हैं. So there is a right to consent. That is foremost.
Yeah.
If I have not consented exclusively for a particular purpose, you cannot use my data in that particular sense in which I have not consented for. If I've said मेरा data सिर्फ और सिर्फ rest the case X purpose के लिए लेंगे, that is specifically for this podcast, and you start using it for some other commercial purpose, which can be anything,
तो
that is where DPDP Act comes in.
इस अगर इस कैलकुलेशन से देखें तो गूगल हमारी इंफॉर्मेशन बहुत ज्यादा मतलब लेता है। तो
Correct.
उस हिसाब से हमें गूगल पर केस करना चाहिए अंडर दिस एक्ट
See,
और
the point is now you're saying क्या ये act retrospective है?
रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव।
Because आप Google पे आज registered नहीं हुए. You might be using your Gmail account from last 10 years,
या
Google Photos from last 8 years,
एग्जैक्टली।
Google Drive from say approximately 10 years. Now that is a point of retrospectiveness. क्या ये लॉ 10 साल पीछे जाता है? Now to that, I would say कि there are provisions with respect to what happens in case your data has already been given. मैं 10 साल 15 साल से गूगल के साथ काम कर रहा हूँ, 15 साल से आई एम शेयरिंग माई पर्सनल डेटा विद देम. So what happens with my personal data, and how are they procuring and processing that data, and then most importantly उस data की security कैसे maintain हो रही है. And last but not the least, what I would patently say कि जो आपका question ये भी है कि should you be filing a case? Is there a data breach? So to your question, I would say, is there a data breach?
या क्योंकि बहुत बार हम किसी साइट पर अपनी डिटेल्स नहीं देते हैं, बट वो ऑटोमेटिकली ऑटो फिल हो जाता है या फिर ऑलरेडी उनके पास हमारा वो डेटा रहता है जो नहीं होना चाहिए। तो अगर हम सिर्फ गूगल
Auto
पे
filling
कर
is not a challenge. हाँ, please
नहीं
please. Yeah.
तो गूगल पे
हाँ.
अगर हम करते हैं तो उसके बाद अदर क्रोम से रिलेटेड या कुकीज वगैरह पॉपअप होती हैं, एंड देन वहाँ पे हमारा डेटा ऑलरेडी फिल हो जाता है या फिर ऑटो फिल हो जाता है। ये रहता है उनके पास।
लेट्स से फॉर
तो
एग्जांपल, एक हम
ब्रीच।
एग्जांपल के थ्रू बात करते हैं। लेट्स से कि
हम्म।
मेटा के अंदर व्हेन यू आर ऑलरेडी यूजिंग लेट्स से सम अदर प्लेटफॉर्म, मेटा में व्हेन यू जस्ट लॉग इन सम ऑफ योर क्रेडेंशियल्स, आप अपने सिस्टम पे व्हेन यू शिफ्ट बिटवीन फ्रॉम इंस्टाग्राम टू फेसबुक वाइस वर्सा, इट ऑटोमेटिकली फिल्स ऑल योर एंट्रीज। आई गेस दैट इज व्हाट यू आर सेइंग।
हाँ
सो वो
हाँ।
ऑटो फिलिंग का सिस्टम, इज दैट अ डेटा ब्रीच और नॉट? सी, if at all you have consented to autofill, this autofill will happen. I don't know if you remember or not, but while doing so, while logging in the very first time, whether it is your ICICI net banking account or Axis Bank net banking account, or the Meta account, you actually consent to autofill. The
ओके।
moment you say yes, I consent to autofill, then this becomes within the purview of the law. So, like I said, it all starts and ends at consent, to my best of understanding. There are some other subjects also which I would be highlighting, that what other rights are there. But more importantly, consent has been very meticulously defined, because consent by this time, it was under it was under the dark. So people were taking consent by one liners, and they were using and processing the data in all the means. Like you will not like you will be highly amazed to know that if I have your data, and let's say a data of about 1 lakh people in India, I can sell it to any corporate, have a huge chunk of money just by that single transaction, let alone everything else. I am just sharing the data with an X company. Now that company might be filtering the data with respect to your, with respect to a health company, let's say for that matter, let's say for example, एक health company के साथ हमने शेयर किया, आपका जो पर्सनल डेटा है उसको वो सिर्फ रिव्यू करेंगे और वो देखेंगे इसमें से कितने बच्चे ऐसे हैं जो लोग 18 साल से नीचे हैं, कितने लोग ऐसे हैं जो 18 से ऊपर हैं, कितने ऐसे हैं जो 60 प्लस हैं. So if you are 60 plus, you might be having some joint pain, you might be having some frequent problem with respect to your health, you might be frequently having a problem with respect to your healthy heart, healthy lungs, right? In that case, I'll start giving you prompts by way of notifications, text messages, that
ओके।
are you having heart problem? Should I suggest you a tablet which solves it all? So there is a miracle tablet that I have introduced, that is where I can use it. Now, children who are under 18, you can say that mostly they are students, right? Parents are more worried with respect to their their development of their brain and their physical well-being, right?
या।
So if I introduce one immunity capsule and one capsule under the pretext that it develops your brain to the fullest, the best memory booster that can ever exist, that becomes the tagline, and I just send it to you. What are the chances that you'll buy it for your child?
आई गेस 90%।
90%.
या।
90%. So that is how it plays. Now, if you would have given the consent to me that XYZ company, or say PSK Legal Associates, Rohit Singh, cannot use this data beyond the rest the case understanding that we have into the picture. If you use this data for any other use, then a specific consent has to be taken. Now, this becomes a separate chapter. So, like I said, it all starts and ends with consent if you want to understand it in a very broader sense. But if you want to understand it in detail, so there is another right to access. When I say
एक्सेस।
individuals can now actually access, and they can correct their personal data. Like say your personal data was recorded with me, and I have been using it and sending you messages all over by just wrongfully mentioning your name. So instead of Rohit Singh, you could have been saying not the first name right or the second name right. So I have the access to my data, and I can actually say that please correct my personal data that is in your records. So that is right to access. Third is very important, right of erasure. If at all, if I'm not happy with you storing and processing my data, I can simply write a text, drop an email that please erase my data from your records, and you are bound under this obligation to erase my data. Next is right to portability. So if at all I say that I'm not happy storing my data at the next place that you're storing, because I can see or I can predict that there can be a data breach, immediately you will have to port that data from place A to B. So that portability concept that we have with our SIM cards, like you can shift from Airtel to Geo and etc. etc. That
यस यस।
data portability has also been put into picture with respect to my request coming to you, that I want this data to be transferred from one place to another. Now, until this time, like I said, there has never been a grievance redressal forum. Like we all have been a victim to some data breach or the other. Like आपने कहा Google के respect में, मेरे साथ I would say with respect to I would not say personally, but हाँ, hotel industry, they have been storing my data, they have been sending me prompts. So they would just simply say that anniversary coming up, should you be visiting our hotel and I'll give you 25% discounts. Your birthday is coming up. Why don't you take 50% discounts on this hotel or this particular, you're throwing a party every year on your birthday. Why don't you come join party at this place? So you must be seeing all those prompts all your life, right? Here comes the picture that if I have not consented for storing my data for this purpose, that means my data is being actually transferred to some party because I never reached out to those hotels. So you might not have reached out to a Sonipat hotel that somehow exists, but still that has your data and they are saying, okay, your anniversary is coming up. Do you want to visit our hotel? So how do they know about me and my wife? Now comes the picture that yes, number one, there is a law. Number two, there is a forum. There is a
Cool.
board that actually with which you can actually register a complaint that I'm not happy with the way somebody is processing my data. So there is a grievance redressal forum and which has a very good impact on the consumers because like we discussed, मैंने पहले भी बताया था कि India actually is moving towards digitalization of every single industry in every single forum, right?
Yes.
मतलब world economics में India is actually one of the pioneers with respect to not just UPI. I would say UPI में हम famous बहुत हो गए because India is actually the number one country who's using the UPI interface. But if you look at it the overall sense, not just UPI, अगर आपको UPI use भी करना है, so what all do you need? You actually need data.
Mm.
Can you register into Paytm without using your data?
No.
Can you use Google Pay without entering your data?
No.
Let alone everything. You just put down the number and I'll suggest what is your name in the in Google Pay, right? Similarly with Paytm, they'll suggest your name that
Ah.
am I sending the money to rest of the case, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
data, right? In the simplest form. इस पूरे प्रोसेस के अंदर एक डर इंस्टिल हो जाता है. दैट फियर इज ये डेटा तो कहीं भी जा सकता है, कभी मेरे अगेंस्ट भी यूज हो सकता है.
Exactly.
If at all there is a banking fraud, there are forums. But if there is just a data fraud, are we paying enough attention to it? This was the question that was before the legislature. Legislature ने लॉ बनाया ही क्यों? The intent was this. ठीक है, financial frauds के लिए we have several forums, we have several codes. Commercial frauds के लिए we have forums. Intellectual property frauds के लिए we have forums. Where is actually a redressal forum when there is a data breach?
Data.
कुछ भी नहीं हुआ, सिर्फ डेटा ही तो breach हुआ. But actually, in today's time, if you have the data, you have everything. So data is the king. If I give you a database of, let's say, 1 crore businessman who are working in India who would be very interested to work with rest the case. Imagine the amount of money that you can make. 1 crore filtered data. I'm transferring to your email, with which you just have to send a single email. Would you want to grow with us? Question mark. Their answer will be yes. You'll send their quotation. The answer will be yes. Immediately, you're sending them a UPI link or a link. They make the payments and you're making money. 1 crore में से अगर 10 लाख ने भी चूज किया, multiplied by your fees and etc. Imagine the amount of money you can make. So it's all about data in today's time. So वो consumer को बहुत mindfully हमने रखते हुए we have given some control to them कि अगर आप मेरे को data देते हो तो I am giving you a protection. The second is businesses like
Businesses.
us. So with respect to businesses, there is an increased compliance burden that has been imposed. कि अगर आप एक बिजनेसमैन है या एक बिजनेस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, you are using somebody's data, so there is a certain degree of obligation that is towards the individual that with whom you're storing the data. In other words, it's your data with me, I am using it, so मेरे ऊपर कुछ burden होना चाहिए. That burden is called the responsibility to use and process that data that has been defined, and the need to ensure that data protection mechanisms are robust. That is more or less a brief description of your answers with respect to the rights that are
Great.
granted to individuals.
Okay. Let's move to another question.
Yeah.
How will the bill affect the way companies collect, store, and process personal data?
Okay. So with respect to that, I would firstly say that data को ना दो segments में हमें understand करना पड़ेगा. कि पहला तो ये कि data किसे कहा गया है. What is personal data? How do we identify personal data? So the first segment is definition of personal data.
Data.
This second segment is processing. तो इसको आप डेटा कलेक्शन भी कह रहे हैं, स्टोरेज भी कह रहे हैं, प्रोसेसिंग भी कह रहे हैं, राइट?
Yeah.
So the number one segment is what is the personal data? Personal data can be defined as anything with which a person can be defined. नहीं समझ आया, थोड़ा और बेटर समझते हैं.
Yeah.
In case आपका कोई भी इंफॉर्मेशन है, let's say there is a guy, some good complexion, I would say whitish complexion, you know, he has brown eyes, good hair, has a beard, looks about 30-35, and is working under the law field, and he happens to be the managing partner of PSK Legal Associates. Can that be my description? If yes, this is my personal data. I am walking on the road. There are 5 cameras installed. In those 5 cameras, my picture is being stored. Is that a certain way in which I can be recognized? Or in that form, I can say कि मेरा किसी ना किसी तरीके से enough description है या enough resemblance है कि यहाँ से मैं इस person को identify कर सकता हूँ.
ओके, लाइक मोल, अगर आपके किसी बॉडी पार्ट में मोल है या फिर कुछ स्क्रैच.
That is something with which I would say कि मैं आपको distinguish कर सकता हूँ.
ओके.
So like say 15,000 PSK लीगल एसोसिएट्स के मैनेजिंग पार्टनर हो जाते हैं, सब के सब हम एक जैसे दिखते हैं, वी आर क्लोन्स, राइट? नाउ हाउ विल यू आइडेंटिफाई? ये डिस्टिंग्विशिंग फैक्टर हो जाएगा.
ओके.
मैं डिस्टिंग्विशिंग फैक्टर की बात नहीं कर रहा, मैं सिर्फ ये कह रहा हूं कि जिस भी एक फॉर्म सेंस से मैं आपका डेटा या एक पर्सन को आइडेंटिफाई कर सकता हूँ, दैट बिकम्स अ पर्सनल डेटा. अब इसमें एक और की एलिमेंट है, आइदर इट हैज टू बी स्टोर्ड डिजिटली. जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल एक डॉक्टर का प्रिस्क्रिप्शन है. एक डॉक्टर प्रिस्क्रिप्शन होता है जो बनता ही कंप्यूटर पे है, राइट? यू गो टू मैक्स, फोर्टिस, अपोलो, दीज बिग ब्रांड, दे स्टोर इट डिजिटली. देन देयर इज अ सेकंड डॉक्टर हु जस्ट वर्क्स, who just practices near your house. You go to them, they'll enter your personal details, right? XYZ is your name, your age is 26, a female, you have these 10 problems, and I've given you these 5 tablets, right? This is your personal data. Yeah. Now I take a screenshot of it and I start recording it digitally. मैं उसको स्कैन करके अपने कंप्यूटर में स्टोर करता हूँ. So my question to all the viewers is, क्या फर्स्ट फॉर्म ऑफ कंप्यूटर सेगमेंट में जो मैंने एक प्रिस्क्रिप्शन बनाया एंड द सेकंड फॉर्म में जो मैंने स्कैन करके बाद में अपलोड किया, विल एनी ऑफ इट not be covered under DPDP Act? The answer to it is both are covered under DPDP Act. Irrespective, अगर उसको डिजिटल फॉर्म में मैं यूज करता हूं, that gets covered under DPDP Act.
उसका यूज किस फॉर्म में हो रहा है ये डिपेंड करता है, ना कि ये कि उसको
यूज
कैसे.
के ऊपर कॉन्सेंट आएगा.
ओके.
देखिए यहाँ पॉइंट क्या आता है, नंबर 1 इज डेटा कलेक्शन.
ओके.
मैं जिस तरीके से डेटा कलेक्ट कर रहा हूँ, यहाँ आई एम अ प्रैक्टिशनर, लेट्स से आई एम अ मेडिकल प्रैक्टिशनर और लीगल प्रैक्टिशनर. आई एम अ लॉयर, so I'll say I'm a legal practitioner. I will be, so let's say you have given me a case of will, right? Now we all know with respect to will, the law is very strict that we cannot disclose the will and the details of it, because that actually brings upon a security problem for the person who has actually written down the will. Okay. लेट्स से कि फिर भी मैंने आपका उस बिल बनाने के लिए सारा डेटा ले लिया, योर आधार कार्ड, योर पैन कार्ड, योर पर्सनल डिटेल्स, आपके फैमिली में डिटेल्स, आपके कितने फैमिली मेंबर्स हैं, व्हाट्स योर मदर्स नेम, फादर्स नेम, देयर आधार कार्ड, योर अदर सिबलिंग्स, योर सन्स और डॉटर, योर चिल्ड्रन, सबका डेटा कलेक्ट हुआ, डिटेल्स नोट डाउन हुई, उसको मैंने डिजिटल फॉर्म में अपलोड कर दिया, राइट? दैट्स डेटा कलेक्शन. आफ्टर डेटा कलेक्शन द सेकेंड इज डेटा स्टोरेज. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि वो इमीडिएटली हम लोग डेटा को यूज करते हैं, दैट डेटा गेट स्टोर्ड समवेयर. सो आई हैव अ जी सूट, राइट? सो आई हैव अ गूगल सूट विच आई हैव फॉर माई ऑर्गेनाइजेशन फॉर एवरी सिंगल डेटा दैट आई हैव. ओके. उस स्टोरेज के लिए आई पे सर्टेन अमाउंट ऑफ मनी. नाउ दैट इज नॉट ओनली फॉर द स्टोरेज पार्ट, बट इट इज ऑल्सो देयर for the protection that they're giving me for my data. So my data cannot get lost, cannot get corrupt, and cannot get breached, or somebody can just install a spyware, or somebody is hacking my drives and everything is going berserk, because every single data that I'm using is very confidential. Now, having said that, second is when I say that once the data has been collected, second is the storage form. So how do I store my data? And the third is processing. So DPDP Act के under is processing को, the data processing, it it includes everything. आपने डेटा कलेक्ट किया, उसके बाद से लेकर सब कुछ डेटा प्रोसेसिंग है. आपने डेटा स्टोर भी किया, उसको भी हम डेटा प्रोसेसिंग की ही फॉर्म मानेंगे. नाउ नंबर वन की एलिमेंट इज कि उसका इम्पैक्ट क्या आ रहा है. बिकॉज अभी तक हमने बहुत बात कर ली कि हम कैसे स्टोर कर रहे हैं, क्या कलेक्शन हो रहा है, क्या स्टोरेज हो रहा है, एंड उसके बाद प्रोसेसिंग की हमने ही बात कर ली. नाउ द फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट इसकी नीड क्या थी. वो नीड अराइज होती है इम्पैक्ट से. इम्पैक्ट इज नंबर वन, डेटा को मिनिमाइजेशन की तरफ हम लेके जा रहे हैं. आई विल नॉट कलेक्ट डेटा more than what it is required for. So the companies can collect data only which is necessary. For example, to make your prescription for a doctor and to write down your will as a lawyer, if I need 10 points of details, then I will only collect, store, process those 10 points, those 10 pointers, nothing more. So like you said in your previous, you prompted in your my previous answer, if there is a mole on my body, that is not a relevant piece of information when I'm drafting a will.
Okay.
And I can't be allowed to, number one,
to
because that can somehow impact your, that can somehow, if I have that data and if I share it with people, that can somehow amount to a data breach. कि आपको वो डेटा कभी शेयर ही नहीं करना था किसी थर्ड पार्टी के साथ. I still shared it. So that is data minimization. जो पर्पस है उसको बहुत लिमिट करना है, कि हम जो पर्पस है with which I am collecting the data, उस पर्पस को हम इतना लिमिट कर दें that if I am using your data, let's say हमारे पास we have a couple of companies who are actually storing the data, collecting the data, storing the data. अब फ्यूचर में क्या होता है, let's say there is a company which is dealing in toys and puzzles. Okay. Now, what I'll be doing foremost, I'll be collecting the data of all the children who are actually ordering from me. Say first cry, or let's say that be the example, right? So मेरा सबसे पहला prompt क्या होगा कि मैं एक डेटा बना लेता हूँ of the parents जिनके बच्चे 2 से 5 साल के हैं, and उस 2 से 5 साल के बेसिस पे I'll start sending prompts. 2 साल का बच्चा more often than not they'll stop using diapers. Diapers वाला सेगमेंट हटा दो, उन्हें diapers का prompt मत दो, उन्हें prompts दो toys का. So I'll start sending notifications with respect to that. So यहाँ क्या हुआ, मैं limit कर देता हूँ that I don't want any such notification. My data should not be used for the purpose anything beyond, let's say what, the current purchase that I'm making. मैं अभी एक साइकिल का परचेज कर रहा हूँ, उस साइकिल के बियॉन्ड मेरा डेटा किसी और चीज के लिए यूज होना चाहिए. लेट्स से समहाउ मैंने कंसेंट कर दिया था क्योंकि मैं आई वाज इन अ हरी और मैंने वो आई जस्ट मेड अ पेमेंट और मैंने जल्दी में कर दिया कंसेंट. नाउ दिस लॉ अलाउज मी कि मैं उसको विड्रॉ भी कर सकता हूँ. नेक्स्ट, सो देयर इज डेटा मिनिमाइजेशन, देयर इज पर्पस लिमिटेशन, सो देयर इज स्टोरेज लिमिटेशन, कि मैं पर्सनल डेटा को भी स्टोर करने की लिमिटेशन पुट डाउन कर सकता हूँ. That personal data should not be retained longer than necessary. So you cannot keep my data forever. So next is data localization. So there is a restriction on transfer of sensitive personal data outside India in some cases. So there are certain cases in which I can also make this condition that my data should not go beyond India. So this actually requires the companies to revamp their entire data collection model, storage practices, implementation, साइबर सिक्योरिटी मेजर्स. सो पहले क्या होता था, डेटा कलेक्ट हो जाता था, किसी एक फॉर्म शेप में कहीं एक पड़ा रहता था, किसी एक ड्राइव में या किसी एक डिवाइस में, एंड नोबडी केयर्ड दैट हाउ दैट डेटा इज बीइंग यूज्ड, वेयर इट इज बीइंग केप्ट. समटाइम्स और मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम एक डेटा रूम होता है जहाँ पे प्यून एंड एवरीबडी इज विजिटिंग वेरी फ्रीक्वेंटली. कोई क्या यूज कर रहा है, नोबडी केयर्स. Here it puts certain degree of responsibility on everybody who's collecting data, storing data, and processing data. That is more or less the impact that the companies are having. Now they'll have to have an IT guy. who will have to put in some sort of restriction कि डेटा कलेक्शन के लिए आपको ये 20 पॉइंट्स पे कंसेंट लेनी है, तो ही ये 20 पॉइंट्स को हम यूज करेंगे। कि हेल्थ
वो
वाले सेगमेंट
स्पेसिफाइड
पे
हो गया
क्लिक
है
हुआ
अभी।
है, बहुत स्पेसिफाइड है। अगर आप मेरे को मैं आपका कोई भी डेटा स्टोर करता हूँ, फॉर लेट्स से योर चाइल्ड इज एडमिटेड इनटू और ही इज एनरोल्ड इन अ स्कूल। सो कल ही आपने अपने बच्चों का एडमिशन कराया एक स्कूल में, दे हैव टेकन ऑल सॉर्ट्स ऑफ डेटा, या while taking and uploading that data, they'll be first taking that should you be or do you wish that your data can be collected for better experience, for sending health related notifications, for suggesting best school uniforms for your child, to name a few. जहां मैंने ये तीन लोगों से बात करी, वहां मैं आपका डेटा उन तीन लोगों के साथ शेयर कर सकता हूँ। वन इज द मेडिकल प्रैक्टिशनर्स विद इन दैट रीजन, क्योंकि वो आपको हेल्थ एडवाइसेस दे सकते हैं that since dengue is coming in and since dengue is at its peak, so you should be using XYZ things. Don't take your child out in the evening hours or later evening hours. And जब मैं आपको यूनिफॉर्म की बात कर रहा हूँ, so I can give it to a couple of uniform vendors, and the uniform vendors can actually,
वेंडर्स।
you know, approach you to send some notifications. Beyond that, I cannot be sharing that data to anybody else. That's the impact. जो डेटा को मैंने कलेक्ट किया, प्रोसेस किया
तो
और आगे यूज किया, इन तीनों के ऊपर देयर इज अ फिल्टर। कैसे कलेक्ट करूंगा, कैसे प्रोसेस करूंगा, एंड इसको यूज कैसे कर सकता हूँ। दैट्स द
ये
इम्पैक्ट ऑन द कंपनी।
स्टोर करना, प्रोसेस करना और
कलेक्ट
लास्ट
करना,
कलेक्ट
स्टोर
करना,
करना, प्रोसेस करना।
ये तीनों ही पेनलाइज किए गए हैं इस एक्ट के अंडर, या फिर तीनों चीजें होना चाहिए तभी ब्रीच माना जाएगा, या
सी
सिर्फ एक चीज से भी चलेगा?
पेनल्टीज, पेनल्टीज की जब हम बात करते हैं तो इस केस के अंदर पहले हमें ये देखना पड़ेगा कि ये जो लॉ है
हम्म।
दैट इज अ लिटिल डिफरेंट फ्रॉम अदर लॉज,
हम्म।
राइट। इसमें पेनल्टी को बहुत स्ट्रिक्टली नहीं इम्पोज किया है। जैसे कि इसमें कोई ऐसा चेकलिस्ट नहीं है। जैसे मैंने अभी आपको बताया, माय डेफिनेशन ऑफ थिंग्स माइट वेरी इफ यू हैव अनदर सेशन विद 10 डिफरेंट लॉयर्स फ्रॉम देयर डेफिनेशन। सो इसमें जो डेटा प्रोसेसिंग है, आप किसी भी चीज को पिनलाइज कैसे करेंगे जब
ओके।
तक आप उसको डायरेक्टली डिफाइन नहीं करेंगे। इफ आई कमिट अ क्राइम, आई एम सपोज टू सफर, राइट, आई एम
हम्म।
सपोज टू बी पिनलाइज।
हम्म।
फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आई didn't intend to, but still somehow I stabbed you. That gets covered, and I have to be punished for that if at all I'm proven guilty. Similar situation, मैं स्टैबिंग या मैं ऐसे भी किसी क्राइम को डिफाइन ही नहीं करता।
ओके, तो वो
आई
पेनलाइज
से
भी
इफ यू आर
कैसे
हर्ट,
होगा?
तो पिनलाइज कैसे होगा। हमें
राइट,
पहले
राइट।
पहला सेगमेंट बहुत डिफाइन करना है।
ओके,
उस
डिफाइन
पहले
करना।
सेगमेंट पे अभी नोबडी हैज डिफाइंड कि डेटा कलेक्शन के 20 मेथड्स हैं।
ओके।
दैट इज नॉट देयर। डेटा स्टोरेज के ये 15 मेथड्स हैं। दैट्स नॉट
ओके।
देयर। डेटा प्रोसेसिंग के भी ये 10 डिफरेंट चैनल्स हैं, और ये मैंने पूरा रोड मैप बनाया हुआ है, 10 डिफरेंट रोड मैप्स। इफ यू चूज बिटवीन दीज 10 रोड मैप्स, देन इट इज अलाउड, एनीथिंग बियॉन्ड दैट नॉट अलाउड। अगर जब तक मैं ऐसे कोडिफाई नहीं करता, everybody has their different understanding of data collection, storage, and processing.
ओके। तो
In
इट्स
these cases, what most can happen is a show cause notice.
ओके।
Now you have to understand कि होगा क्या. So
ओके।
in these cases, somebody will the department, sorry, not even the department, the board will send you a show cause notice.
सो
They'll simply say that the statute talks about data collection, storage, and processing in a certain way. You simply tell us how you were complying with all these terms as on 3rd of October 2024, and how the data that rest the case shared with PSK Legal was not breached under the law. वो show cause notice का मैं I will just read it. I'll say okay fine, rest the case 3rd of October, certain data must have been exchanged. I'll revisit my date and I'll prepare a reply to that, that with respect to law, the entire data that was collected with a consent. I gave them the access to their data. I gave them the right to withdraw that data. They did not withdraw it. They were under a contract, that we were both under a contract wherein it was written directly that I'll be sharing data, they'll be sharing data, and there was no data breach at all. So the data breach or the leakage that must have happened somewhere else. बिकॉज मैंने जो उनसे डेटा लिया था मैंने स्ट्रिक्टली उसको अपने पास ही स्टोर किया, आई डिड नॉट शेयर इट विद एनी कंपनी. I gave a reply to the show cause notice. The board was satisfied and they exempted me. Now, second situation, इस generic reply के अंदर they found flaw. Now there are severe penalties that have been imposed. So, अब एक सिंपल शब्दों में अगर बात की जाए तो ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि आपने डेटा ब्रीच भी कर दिया एंड कुछ भी नहीं हो रहा.
Mhm.
क्योंकि आजकल इफ यू सी फ्रॉम अ ब्रॉडर पर्सपेक्टिव इट इज एक्चुअली द डेटा विच इज बीइंग सोल्ड. फॉर एनी बिजनेस टू वर्क, for any business to excel, the difference between a mediocre company and a top tier company is the data.
Yeah.
If Geo is having a data of how many people are using Airtel Extreme or Stream, whatever is their network, or how many people are actually using any other network provider, how easy it gets for me to approach them. I'll simply give them a 25% discount for first 12 months if they
Exactly.
join me,
Yeah.
and I can actually port their services, right? So it is actually the data which is the difference between a mediocre company and a top tier company. जो लो लाइन कंपनीज होती हैं वो तो सर्वाइवल के लिए फाइट कर रही हैं. उनका बस यही टारगेट होता है ये साल कट जाए somehow. The mediocre companies are the companies who want to excel. They have money, but उन्हें इस right place पे invest करना है. So the right place is data. If you're investing on data, you can excel. So since that commercial angle was coming in, it was actually the need of the hour कि एक DPDP Act आए जिससे एटलीस्ट इंडिविजुअल्स एट लार्ज ऐसा ना हो कि दे आर द वंस हु आर विक्टिमाइज्ड टू एवरी सिचुएशन, नॉट एवरी कंपनी प्लेइंग tricks.
I think we have covered all our questions for now. Advocate Singh, thank you so much for sharing your valuable time and expertise with us. We appreciate you
Thank you so much.
valuable insights. I'm sure all our listeners will have some insights and useful takeaways from the knowledge you have shared. We look forward to many more informative conversation on other engaging topics. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.